Bookcase TV is brought to you in part by La Marina Restaurant.
What does spirituality mean this century? A lot of people think it all started with the Big Bang. A lot of people as well think it did not. A lot of people think to be spiritual you have to practice through religion, while also a lot of people do not believe that. Spirituality can come in all forms and shape. It can hit you at the most unexpected moment, for example, taking a stroll in the park or even sitting on the bench. Or old age sets in and question about the nature of the existence and death itself come knocking on the door. Sylvia, can you get the door for me and tell I'm not taking an appointment today? I have a new investigation, a new case at St. John the Divine. Thank you. New book, Evolutionary Enlightenment. The title is loaded with meaning, it's Evolution and Enlightenment.
Well, the Enlightenment refers to the Eastern definition of enlightenment, which means the experience of consciousness beyond the small self, beyond the ego.
When I started reading the book and thinking about enlightenment, I come from a literary background, which has a completely different meaning. And I always think about a story about Mozart, Beethoven. Mozart wrote music for the gods, for the heavens, and here comes Beethoven as a bridge to the Romanticism and start writing music of the age of enlightenment for the self, which is a complete contradiction to your definition.
So well, it's different. You're talking about the Western Enlightenment.
That's right.
And here I'm talking about the Eastern Enlightenment. They're both very important enlightenments. I think actually we need both.
Do we need to reclaim ourselves first before we can be enlightened?
When we awaken to consciousness, it's the actual discovery of what's always in the ground of our experience, but that which we tend to not be aware of. When we pay attention to look at what's actually at the ground of our experience, we discover that that which is the ground of our experience is infinite. So it's the discovery of the infinite nature of the ground of our own experience. And if we keep looking, we will recognize that which is the ground of our experience is the most intimately felt sense of self at all times. Even though we're not aware of it, we don't know that.
Now, are we talking about an awareness or being awareness?
It's a truth about the nature of who we are that we become aware of, but also it's an existential knowing. It's the knowing that who I am has no beginning and has no end. Who I am is infinite, beginningless and endless. Evolution points to the fact that we're part of a process, a developmental process that had a beginning in time 14 billion years ago, and that beginning catalyzed a process of becoming, a progressive developmental process of becoming. The human experience is actually a part of a cosmic developmental process, and that we actually are inseparable from the evolution of the cosmos as a whole. And when we realize that, our sense of self relates way back to the beginning of time and begins to point towards the infinite future. We realize that our body, that our mind, our intellect, that our consciousness is really a capacity in the universe to bear witness to itself, to become conscious of itself, and ultimately to be able to engage with itself.
What do you mean by non-duality? Because it's not so much just mind and body relationship. For you, it's just what you just described, the oneness.
All the most revered mystics from all the world's great wisdom traditions and religious traditions have always said the same thing. They say that the ultimate truth about the nature of reality is that there's only one and not two. So it could be a Sufi master, it could be a Jewish Kabbalistic mystic, it could be a Hindu yogi or a Buddhist monk. They will all say the same thing, that the ultimate truth about the nature of reality is that there's only one and not two. The term non-duality refers to the mystical realization that the ultimate nature of reality is that there's only one and not two. The question is, what does that mean? What does it mean that there's only one and not two? Because it's this particular revelation or insight that has been the source of spiritual liberation for men and women for the last probably 3,000 years. In the revelation of the Buddha, the insight of the Buddha was the discovery of the deepest part of reality and the deepest part of the self. The Buddha called it the unborn and the uncreated. We can relate that to the primordial, timeless, formless void from which the entire creative process emerged, from which time and space emerged. When one enters into a very deep meditative state, a meditator or a yogi or a mystic has the experience that when everything is gone, I'm still here, but who I am then is formless and timeless, beginningless and endless. This original discovery of oneness was the actual experiential awakening to this primordial dimension of reality, which has recently been called the ground of being. When we discover the ground of being, all there is the experience of beginningless and endless formlessness. There's nothing there, and yet there's an infinite expanse of something which is not a thing, but which is the ultimate nature of who we all are.
So what do we do with that once we know all that?
We don't do anything. It becomes the source of a recognition of a primordial freedom.
That's why the manifestation, I suppose, of the momentum.
What I'm talking about now is what exists before time. When you go into a meditative state, you go back to before the time process began. But before time, before history, there was no wound, there was no history, nothing had gone wrong, so that you experience this pristine, primordial nature of the deepest part of yourself. But there's no fear there, there's no doubt, there's no woundedness. So because of that, there's an experience of pristine, untouched freedom. Another definition of oneness, which is very much what the book of Evolutionary Enlightenment is about, and what I'm saying here is that the entire evolutionary process, all of manifestation, all of time and space came from primordial emptiness, from nothing whatsoever. It emerged from zero. Everything that exists emerged from absolute zero. So therefore, we could say that zero, or emptiness, or nothingness, and everything that exists, right, is non-separate, is non-dual, is one. So this would be the second definition of oneness, is that the unmanifest and the manifest are one and not two. And as the third definition, which is the one I'm most excited about, which is that we have discovered in the last 200 years that the world of form, the evolving universe, is in a creative process. Well, it's expanding, but it's also evolving and developing, right? The world of time and space and life and mind is a process that's going somewhere. It's in a state of becoming. So the third definition of non-duality here is that the evolutionary process itself is in a state of becoming.
So what about the spiritual awakening?
The spiritual awakening can occur at any time for any reason. It's very mysterious. This can happen for any reason. We don't really know why. But what I do think is important to understand, what I want to try and convey to people, is that there is a spiritual impulse that human beings experience. And the spiritual impulse is when some of us experience a mysterious urge or compulsion or desire to become more conscious. I call the evolutionary impulse the creative motive in the cosmos that caused the universe to exist, that's compelling the universe to exist. And human beings experience this creative impulse or evolutionary impulse most powerfully as the urge towards creativity. The human species is the only life form on this planet that are compelled to create, to innovate, to give rise to that which is new. And it's a compulsion. It's a compulsion in our species. It's not something we're taught. We're not taught when we're young that you must create, you must innovate, you must give rise to that which is new. But it seems, if you look back throughout the evolution of human history, that our species has been compelled at an ever more quickening rate to innovate and create and to give rise to that which is new. And so it's very interesting when we realize that the urge towards innovation and creativity is synonymous with and is one with the same drive that compelled the universe to come into being and which is compelling it to exist right now. What's very significant about this is human beings are capable of directly experiencing the vibration and the pulsation of the energy and intelligence that created the universe and is creating the universe. And I actually feel that experience at this particular point in history for human beings, really at the leading edge of cultural development, that really is the next font or the next field or the next domain of spirituality. When you experience an urge to become more conscious, or I do, it's not merely me the individual or you the individual that is experiencing a spiritual impulse. It's the universe itself in the form of you or I that is being compelled to become more conscious. So then you could say the energy and intelligence that created the universe is aspiring to become more conscious through us, which is very interesting. So therefore, the universe is actually trying to become more conscious. And how do I know it? Because universally, human beings have been compelled towards consciousness for thousands of years.
So are you saying that we can't almost help ourselves to create? Or,
yes.
Or is there like more like an intention?
More than being a unique individual, we are the process itself, awakening to itself and bearing witness to itself through the form of this unique individuality. And then it changes in the most dramatic way what it means to be a human being.
Has anyone ever done a Course in Miracle here? I would like to be able to make miracles. My investigation will be so much easier. Anyone? Believe it or not, but I've never met anyone with a Colier as a last name. And, you know, I've only met one person before with one L. Most people have two L's. It must be you and I related somewhere down the road.
We might be at some point.
Any clue how or no? So tell us about your book, Inviting a Monkey to Tea. What prompted you to write it, first of all?
I've been a psychotherapist for about 20 years. I watched people spend their entire lives chasing this thing called happiness, but most of the time being in the chase, not actually experiencing happiness. They would get it for a short bit, and then because life is constantly changing, they would lose it. Or they would get it and it would stop bringing them happiness. People, when they're not happy, they feel like they're missing out on something great in life that they're supposed to have. And they also feel like failures. They haven't managed to create this thing called happiness and hold on to it. Mm-hmm. It teaches us to have a certain kind of relationship with the moment, this moment right here, which is it's never enough. Because there's something outside of us somewhere that's going to make us be able to bear this moment. But the truth is, as soon as we get to that thing, we can't be in that moment either, because we're trying to keep it, or we're focused on when we're not going to have it anymore.
Why do you think this is happening? Is this like cultural? Is it educational? Why do we always look for the outside to find contentment?
The basis of my book was I started to ask a couple questions. One was, is there something beside happiness that we should be thinking about? Because happiness is the wrong goal for this life.
It's a pretty controversial statement, given it's written in the American Constitution. Everyone is entitled to the pursuit of happiness.
Absolutely. It's a very controversial thing to say, and yet, what if we started to look for something that I call well-being, a state that can remain well even when the contents of our life are not to our liking? What if we could actually discover a state of well-being that could not only tolerate the changes that life brings everybody's life, but what if we could actually live from there?
Well, this is all very nice, it's conceptual, but how do you implement that?
If we start out believing we are every thought we have, believing we are every feeling we have, believing we are all completely identified with our thoughts, feelings, and sensations, and then you hear these spiritual masters and they talk about, oh, pay no mind to the mind, right? It doesn't matter what your mind, let it dance, let it do its thing. Well, what's the bridge? How do we go from being our mind, we are our thoughts, to letting our mind dance around? So how you get there, the middle step, right, is building a kind of compassion for our own mind. But what if we could actually start to relate to our own experience in a way that's almost, we delight in it. It's, wow, look what craziness is coming now, but with a sense of kindness. Mind believes it's only mind. It doesn't know that it's actually housed in this infinite awareness. So it's always trying to protect itself. What if we were to build a kind of loving relationship with that mind and all that it does? When I talk about the bridge, I'm talking about starting identified with mind, moving into compassionate witness of mind, and eventually our very identity becomes that kind container which can let mind do its thing, let circumstance do its thing, and it's not that it doesn't matter, it's that we know we're not it.
So this is what you talk about beyond well-being.
That's right, that's right.
How does one go about or experience that beyond the well-being?
Well, you know, what's interesting is that can happen in infinite ways. The very first thing I would say is we just have to start to actually pay attention to our own mind. We actually start to listen. Wow, what's our mind up to right now? Right now, I could tell you 500 things that my mind is, it's like a ticker tape, it's going by. Then I start to actually take notice of what's the sensation of emotion that's moving through me right now. Maybe it's a little excitement, maybe it's a little frustration. Then I start to take notice of what are the physical sensations happening. There's a kind of popping energy, there's a pain in my foot. What we're doing is we're starting to practice building a relationship with what's happening inside of us. And then, of course, whatever we notice, we bring some kind of curious kindness to it. But what I talk about in this book is how can we be with now in a way that is not identified with it, is not distant from it as witness, but it's like the wetness in a wave, right? Or the heat within a flame. It's inside what's arising, but it's not defined by it. Because it's not about me.
Is it always possible to isolate emotions from the context?
If I ask you what you're feeling right now, most people will say, well, I'm upset because, and then they're going to tell me the story. And then I say, well, stay with that a little longer. See if you can feel just the upset. And then they'll say, well, I feel it as a pain in my knee. So now they're still describing the sensation. I'll say, no, feel the upset. Inside upset, without story, it's an entirely different experience. We're terrified to join experience, which is actually bliss, because we need to have a relationship with it, which keeps ego-mind alive.
Are we completely unable all the time just to be completely here?
I say often we're allergic to now. That's the way I describe it.
Because you talk a lot about being now, living now.
Right.
And
what most people consider living now, honestly, is that they're commenting on now, right? Is this moment saying good things about me or bad things about me? What is this moment doing for my identity? And they consider that being here now. What if you were to taste now itself? So I'm talking about a presentness that is radically different than the way people say, oh, I'm in the now because I'm paying attention to now. No, there's still two. There's an I and a now. What creates well-being is stopping the trying.
Inviting a monkey to tea, so
Right.
a great title. What does that mean exactly?
If you were to take a monkey, have it stung by a bee, and then give it a bottle of wine to drink and lock it in a cage, that's the human condition. The monkey doesn't know that it really is part of something much larger. It believes if it's not there that there's extinction, there's only non-existence. So it's frantically always trying to defend itself. So the nature of mind is to be wild and be disjointed and be frantic and be certain that if it is told to stop doing, that's the end of existence for you, because it believes it's only you. When we realize that, we can invite the monkey to tea without being so afraid. It's a much freer and more liberated existence.
Acorns are highly deceptive. What is more potent than an acorn? Nothing comes even close to it. What other seeds could you plant and brag about getting 100-foot tall trees, living for several hundred years? I always thought that to succeed in life, you must have a real estate mentality. Select a street and build a house, then another and another. Over a lifetime, you will have accumulated a nice portfolio, if not the whole street you will own. Here's a company that started by selling cassettes by mail and today leads its niche market.
Sounds True started in 1985 with a woman named Tammy Simon. We're a multimedia publisher. We publish books, audios, we do online learning courses, DVDs, over 1,100 titles in
really?
print. Back in 2000, we ventured into the world of book publishing. We have so much content from our audios and online courses that we thought we should venture into books. In 2012, actually, I think 20% of our revenue actually came from hard book sales.
Why do you think Sounds True is doing so well in this time we're living through?
There is a lack of community from everything being digitalized, and so these sort of spiritual teachers and authors that we're publishing, they enable, I think, people to look inward. And Sounds True is a community within itself. I know, Tammy Simon, our founder, she receives letters and emails weekly from people thanking her for the work that she does and for, the work that we publish, because it is so rich and meaningful to people and really does help them transform their lives.
Do you think modern life is alienating? People feel alienated from themselves?
Yes, definitely. I mean, look how crazy the world is these days. And I think the products that we publish enable people to really look inward and maybe think about what's more important, to be more mindful about themselves and their life and their relationships and the environment, to also see that there's more than just material things or work in the world. It enables them to dive deep and, really learn what's important in life.
So here's a word of advice. Next time you come across an acorn, think about all this mighty thing that grows from the smallest seeds. Remember, reading blows your mind. Sylvia. So welcome back to this week Pick of the Week, and our first pick for the week is SQ21, 21 Skill of Spiritual Intelligence by Cindy Wigglesworth. A great read, actually. I really enjoyed it because I'm very familiar with Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence book that came out about 10-15 years ago. This book followed pretty much the same setup of quadrants and developed each step radically in a way that you can actually cultivate your spiritual self. So if you feel like you're lacking in your life, that side of you is very fallow or drought, you can actually work it, and she gives a beautiful map how to achieve that. Cindy Wigglesworth, SQ21, 21 Skill to Spiritual Intelligence. And the next book of this week, Picks of the Week, is The Evolution's Purpose by Steve McIntosh. A subtitle, An Integral Interpretation of the Science Story of Our Origins. It talks obviously about evolution and how evolution can lead to a better understanding of science and a greater wealth of spiritualities. We take us from the pre-biotic understanding of what organisms are to the modern world and how the development of consciousness or understanding of evolution can only increase our wealth of consciousness. You should read it because it's very interesting. The Evolution's Purpose by Steve McIntosh. And the final book for this week, Pick of the Week, on this inspirational segment is Belonging Here by Judith Blackstone. A wonderful book for spiritually sensitive people. Often, when you are very sensitive spiritually, it doesn't have to become an escape to shun away the world. And this book talks about how to remain connected with the world as opposed to escape it. She has a process called the realization process. It's a 5-step process. It talks about if you have thin skin, what to do, if you have a meditation process. Stay connected to yourself without closing the door to what the world has to offer. You could be also hearing the cries of the world, have a sort of innate compassion in order to hear the other suffering and without experiencing the internal or spiritual fragmentation. But these are 2 of the 5-step process. It's very well written, it's clear prose. This is Belonging Here by Judith Blackstone. Can I start again? I think maybe too early for miracles today.